Hi guys! Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in May. I read 9 books. I had a pretty good reading month because most of my ratings were 4.5, 4-star, 5-star reads. I had one 3.5-star read. I've decided to change up things in the way I do my wrap-up once again because I'm inconsistent. It's not too different, it's not too crazy. So from my lowest rating, which was 3.5 stars, but since it was the second book of a series, I'm gonna add the other book as well, and that was the Shadow of the Templar series by M. Chandler. The first book being Morning Star, which I gave 4 stars, and then book 2, Double Down, which I gave 3.5 stars. I touched upon this series in my currently reading video. Yeah, this is a new series I've been introduced to. In my currently reading video, I already mentioned that I feel like this is going to be a new obsession. Unfortunately, my excitement has been toned down just a tiny bit because something upsetting happened in book 2. To shortly explain this series, it's a male-male romance story about Simon Drake, who is an FBI agent, and Jeremy Archer, who is an art thief, and Simon is trying to catch Jeremy. Book 1 was absolutely fantastic, so funny, and just so much fun in general. The banter between the two characters was A+, some of the best banter I've read in a very long time, so I very quickly became obsessed with Simon and Jeremy. Thank you, Bex. This is a self-published series, and the author even has the books on her website, so you can read them for free, but they're also available on Amazon as ebooks if you want to read them that way. So I had so much fun reading book 1. I was an emotional mess, and thank God I had Bex to message. Right after I finished book 1, I started book 2, and I had just as much fun until the slurs. Unfortunately, one character, Simon, the main character, on multiple occasions uses the word faggot or fag or some kind of variation. It's not like a crazy amount, but probably like 4 or 5 times. Bex and I have talked about this, and she has already finished the series, and she's been reading the extra content that's on M. Chandler's website, and she has these versions of the books where she has author's notes on the side, and at some point, I think in book 3, Bex sent me a screenshot in which the author talked about these characters using slurs, because unfortunately in book 3 there are also slurs used, and the author M. Chandler talked about this. Let me see if I can find the screenshot. It might take me a while because Bex and I message quite a bit. So I have the author's note, whatever, that where she talked about these slurs. She does say, in real life she doesn't use these terms under any circumstances, and she tends to cringe when people do so around her. Her characters do not live an examined life. They're not at all aware of their own privilege. I made them talk like 20-something middle-class Americans who have never stopped to consider these issues or have considered them and have chosen to deal with them in ways that are sometimes unpleasant. It feels more real to her to write them this way. I think what she's trying to say with this is she wanted to make these characters more real for them to be using slurs, but honestly there are different ways to make your characters seem more real, so to me that's not a good enough reason. There's never a good enough reason to use slurs. There's just no reason. So I feel like it could have been handled differently. Despite these slurs being used in this series, I have still enjoyed these books. Not as much. Like, it gives me a weird feeling to enjoy these books, and I wouldn't recommend these with a good feeling. If you do intend to read them, just be aware of these slurs being used. Really sucks. I'm very conflicted on this because these characters, like in book 1, these slurs weren't used in book 1, and I got really attached to the characters and just how fun the story is. And then for that to happen in book 2, when I was already so attached, was just really upsetting. That's all I have to say about this, I think. Moving on to the next book, The Girl from Everywhere by Heidi Heilig. This is a fantasy book about time traveling. Our main character is Nyx, who is on this ship with her father, who is the captain of this ship. On this ship, they can time travel and her father is trying to travel back to a time when Nyx's mother was alive, because she died when she gave birth to Nyx or shortly after that, and he wants to get back to her. As usual, links to all the books I mentioned will be down below because, as we know by now, I'm horrible at summaries, so if you want to know anything more about a book, click the link down below. Usually I'm not a big fan of time traveling books because the time travel aspect tends to confuse me, and the same happened with this. I was slightly confused as to how the time traveling happened, but that didn't take away from my enjoyment of the story. It was still really interesting and quite fun. I really liked Nyx as a main character. Also her love interest, Kashmir. I don't think that's how you pronounce his name, but I don't know, Kashmir. That's how I said it in my head. I loved how their relationship built up in the story, even with them already knowing each other at the start of the book. There was just a really nice build up to where their relationship got to at the end of the book. I don't know if I'm making sense, I'm very sorry. Overall, this was very enjoyable. This book counted towards my diversity bingo sheet for the non-Western real-world setting. Not sure if I mentioned this, but I gave this 4 stars. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and I also gave this 4 stars. I don't have a lot to say about this. I really enjoyed it. I loved Agnieszka as a main character, and I especially loved her dynamic with the dragon. It was so good. I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I'm sure you've all heard about this book. This is about Star, who witnesses her childhood best friend being shot by a police officer. It's all around the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was so incredible, so relevant, so important. Everyone should read this. Honestly, I can't even say more than this was really important. I think everyone should read this. It was so moving. And before I try to ramble through more of a review of this, I'm instead gonna link you to 2 reviews down below by Black reviewers who talked about The Hate You Give, just because I want to highlight Own Voices reviews about this book, and their thoughts are probably more insightful than mine because they can probably relate to a lot more of this book than I can. So you should definitely check them out. Like I said, they're linked down below. And I gave this 4.5 stars. Also, this counted towards my diversity bingo sheet for the book by an author of color. The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This is about Molly, who crushes on a lot of people, but Molly never acted upon these feelings because she doesn't think she can handle the rejection. I fell in love with this story. I didn't think I would be able to relate to this as much as I actually did. When I realized how much I could relate to Molly, it hit me hard because some things that she felt throughout this story just really got to me and actually made me anxious because they brought me back to my school days, which weren't pleasant most of the time. Especially towards the end, I was really glad to be done with school. I felt for Molly so hard. I loved her, I cried for her, I was happy for her. What also made me love this book so much is that it's incredibly diverse. There are so many diverse characters. There are so many different sexualities represented in this, also people of color, and Molly's family is Jewish. Also, I really, really loved the family in this and just their dynamic together. Just this entire book was beautiful, and I gave this 4.5 stars, and this also counted towards my diversity bingo sheet for the main character with an underrepresented body. I received an e-arc of How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake. I also talked about this in a currently reading video. I'm not quite sure which one because I was reading this book for a long while. I'm pretty sure I would have finished it sooner if I'd been able to read it on my phone or my Kindle, but I wasn't because NetGalley sent me this weird file that I could only read on my laptop, which was really annoying because that way it took me longer to read. Nonetheless, this story was so beautiful. We have Grace, who is alone with her mother, and her mother is a bit unstable. She's not a very good mother. and most of the times Gracie has to take more care of her mother than the other way around. And one day her mother tells her that they're moving in with this guy and his son, and she meets Eva, whose mother recently died and she's going through a hard time, and these two meet, get to know each other, and fall in love, and it's so precious. I love Grace. Grace is bisexual. I'm pretty sure Eva is a lesbian. I could relate to Grace in so many ways. I loved her so much. And we got to see so many different relationships in this book. Not only romantic relationships, but friendships and family relationships, and just, it was so amazing. I loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, but I've considered putting my rating up to 5 stars just because I loved it so much. And once again, this counted towards my diversity bingo sheet for the main character, no, for the bisexual main character that is Own Voices, which this is. Moving on to my 2 5-star reads, I reread Night Owls by Jen Bennett. I'm not gonna talk too much about it because I actually have a review up for this, which I will link down below. It's quite old and very cringy, and I'm overly excited. Night Owls is about Bex and Jack, who meet on this midnight bus, and Jack is actually this notorious graffiti artist, and Bex is the only person who knows, and she's trying to be a medical illustrator. That was it. I love Bex and Jack. They're so precious, and this story is just beautiful. I gave this 5 stars again. Technically, it was the first book I read in May, but the last book I'm going to talk about is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is book 3 in the Shades of Magic series. This was incredible. Such a good ending to a trilogy. I just really liked where the plot was heading in this book, and how everything just came together at the end. I really loved all the characters and their different perspectives, and the ending had me sobbing so much. So much. Very sad that the series is over because I really enjoyed these characters. I don't have more to say about this because it's been over a month since I finished this. Basically, I loved this book and the series and the characters, and V.E. Schwab. She is such a fantastic writer. If you have not read a book by V.E. Schwab yet, I don't know what you're doing. She is such an incredible author. So those were all the books that I read in May. Like I said, I'm very happy with what I read and how much I read. As for June, I am dedicating the entire month of June to only LGBTQIA+ books because June is Pride Month, and even though I've been trying to read more books by LGBTQIA+ authors and with characters, I just want to highlight even more and just read all the gay books basically. I posted a photo on Instagram with just a few choices that I already own, but I might buy a few books in June as well. If you have any recommendations for LGBTQIA+ books, leave them down below. If you've read any of the books that I have read this month, tell me your thoughts down below. Also, tell me your favorite book of the month down below. My favorites were obviously Conjuring of Light, How to Make a Wish, and The Morning Star, just because of how fun and addictive that one is. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. That was it for this time, and I will see you next time. Bye!